This story is titled, After 4 years of studying abroad, I came home to my parents. But when I knocked on their door, they said they weren't expecting me and told me to get lost. So I simply said, okay, and immediately plotted my revenge. 2 days later, my phone blew up with 32 missed calls from the entire family. Hey Reddit, my name is Tyler and I'm 30 years old. For the past 8 years, I've been working offshore on drilling platforms in the North Sea, and let me tell you, it's one of the most brutal jobs you can imagine. Picture this. You're stuck on a metal platform in the middle of the ocean for 2 weeks straight, working grueling 13-hour shifts in absolutely any weather conditions Mother Nature can throw at you. I'm talking about massive 45-foot waves during storms that make the entire platform shake like it's going to break apart. The equipment we work with weighs thousands of pounds and can easily crush you if you make even one wrong move. There are toxic gases everywhere that can kill you before you even realize you're breathing them in. Over my 8 years out there, I've survived 4 major hurricanes and countless equipment failures that could have killed me in seconds. I've witnessed accidents that would make your stomach turn just thinking about them. 4 years ago, I lost 3 fingers on my left hand when a cable snapped under tension during a chain slip. The sound of that cable breaking still gives me nightmares to this day. But every single time I deposit that paycheck and see those numbers appear in my bank account, I remember exactly why I put myself through this hell. Growing up, I was always considered the black sheep of my family. And honestly, I can see why now. My dad, Robert, works in sales at the local Ford dealership and brings home maybe $48,000 in a good year when he actually puts in effort and tries to sell cars. My mom, Lisa, hasn't worked a single day since I was born. She just stays home all day watching television and spending money on QVC shopping networks, constantly ordering weird kitchen gadgets and cheap jewelry that just sits in boxes around the house, never used. My sister Madison is 27 years old and has never managed to hold down a steady job for longer than 7 months. She just bounces between different guys who are willing to pay her bills while she finds herself and figures out what she wants to do with her life. My younger brother Blake is 25 and still lives at home in his childhood bedroom. He works part-time at a comic book store while spending 14 hours a day playing video games. When I graduated high school, I made the decision to tell my family that I wasn't going to college. Instead, I wanted to learn welding and eventually work on oil rigs. My dad went absolutely insane when I told him this. He called me a worthless dropout and said I'd never be anything but trailer trash. We had this massive, screaming fight right there in our living room. He told me that if I walked out that door to chase some stupid dream, I shouldn't bother coming back home. My mom just sat there crying during the whole argument. Madison rolled her eyes like I was being overly dramatic about the whole situation. Blake didn't even bother looking up from his Xbox. So I took my dad at his word and didn't come back for almost 9 years. But here's where it gets really interesting and shows you exactly what kind of people they truly are. Once I started making serious money on those oil rigs, suddenly I became their favorite son again. They would call me asking for emergency loans that were never ever paid back. Every few months, it was something new and urgent that required my immediate financial assistance. Madison would need $1,300 for rent because her boyfriend had kicked her out after she maxed out all of his credit cards. Blake would want an $850 gaming chair and a $650 graphics card because his old setup was apparently embarrassing compared to what his online friends had. My mom's 16-year-old Honda Civic would need $2,600 in transmission work, but she had been completely ignoring all the warning signs for months before it finally broke down completely. My dad's truck would need new tires that cost $950, but only after he had driven on completely bald ones for over a year. The water heater would break, and they'd need $1,600 to replace it, but they had already spent their entire emergency fund on a vacation to Orlando. Madison got arrested for drunk driving and needed $3,200 for a lawyer because it was her second offense. Blake crashed my mom's car while texting and driving, and they needed $3,000 for repairs because insurance wouldn't cover it due to his negligence. The pattern was always exactly the same, without fail. There would be a crisis that was completely caused by their own poor decisions and lack of planning. This would be followed by frantic, desperate phone calls to me begging for a bailout. Every single time they called, it was presented as a life or death emergency that needed to be solved immediately. Every time I sent them money, they would promise with tears in their eyes that they would pay me back as soon as possible. Every time they actually received the money, I would never hear another word about paying it back again. I was a complete idiot and kept helping them, because I genuinely thought that's what family was supposed to do for each other. I figured they were just going through some rough patches and that things would eventually get better once they got back on their feet. I had no idea how wrong I was about everything. This past January, I made the decision to take my first real vacation in 4 years. I was planning to spend a whole month at home during Easter time, and I was genuinely excited about the possibility of reconnecting with my family. I had even gone ahead and bought a house in town with cash, a beautiful 4-bedroom place that cost me $315,000. I was planning to surprise them with it and show them what I had accomplished. I thought maybe we could all have Easter dinner there together. You know, start over fresh and put the past behind us. Maybe they would finally see that I had made something real of myself, and we could actually be a genuine family again. I should have known better than to get my hopes up. On March 15th, I was at Home Depot picking out flowers for the yard of my new house. I was actually feeling excited about the holidays for the first time in years, genuinely looking forward to spending time with my family. Then I got this text message from my dad that completely blindsided me. "Don't come home for Easter, we need a break from your attitude." I'm standing there in the garden center, reading this message thinking, what the actual fuck? I immediately texted back asking, what attitude? I hadn't even made it home yet. I had literally just driven into town that morning and went straight to the store. I texted back again asking, what are you talking about? His response came about an hour later and was even more confusing. You know exactly what you did find somewhere else to spend the holidays. I had absolutely no clue what I supposedly did wrong. I tried calling him, but it went straight to voicemail. I called my mom, and the same thing happened. Madison and Blake weren't picking up their phones either. I started to panic, thinking maybe someone had gotten hurt or died, and somehow it was my fault. Maybe there was some kind of family emergency that I didn't know about, and I had somehow made it worse. Finally, Madison called me back around 9 p.m. I could hear party music playing loudly in the background. "Tyler, yeah, Dad doesn't want you here anymore," she said casually. "You're just going to start drama like you always do." I was completely confused. "What drama? I just got to town. I haven't even seen you guys yet." "Whatever. I don't want to deal with your shit right now. Just stay away," she replied coldly. "Madison, what the hell is going on? What did I supposedly do?" I asked, getting more frustrated. "I don't know, ask Dad. I'm busy," she said, and then she just hung up on me. 8 years of sending them money when they needed it. 8 years of missing holidays to work double shifts so I could afford to help them out financially. This was the thanks I got. No explanation, no discussion, just get lost. I drove to my new house that night and sat in the empty living room looking at the flowers I had bought, feeling like the biggest fool who had ever lived. I had actually thought this Easter would be different. I thought maybe we could finally be a real family again. Easter Eve was honestly the worst day I've ever experienced in my entire life. I've been in some truly life-threatening situations on those oil rigs where I genuinely thought I might die. But nothing compared to the emotional devastation of that day. I tried calling my mom on Easter morning, and she actually answered this time. But she sounded weird and distant, completely different from how she normally talked to me. "Tyler, just leave us alone. We're trying to have a peaceful holiday," she said coldly. "Mom, I'm serious. What did I do? I have no idea why everyone's mad at me," I pleaded. "Don't act stupid. Robert told us about the money situation," she replied. I was completely baffled. "What money situation? What are you talking about? How you've been lying to us about how much you make. How you bought that house without telling us. How you've been hiding money from your own family," she accused. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I wasn't hiding anything from them. I had worked my ass off for every single dollar on those dangerous platforms. I bought the house as a surprise because I was planning to invite them all over for Easter dinner and show them what I had been working toward all these years. "Right, you just wanted to show off how much better you think you are than us," she said sarcastically. "Mom, I've given you guys over $38,000 in the past 2 years alone. How is that showing off?" I asked, my voice breaking. "That's different. That was helping family. This house thing is just rubbing our faces in it," she responded. I tried to explain that buying a house to spend time with family wasn't rubbing anyone's faces in anything, but she cut me off. "Because you didn't tell us. You just went and did it on your own like we don't matter," she said, and then hung up on me. I was so angry that I punched the wall and immediately regretted it because I had just bought the place. My knuckles were bleeding, and there was a hole in the drywall. I spent the entire Easter day assembling furniture that I had ordered online because I didn't know what else to do with myself. Every piece I put together just reminded me that I had bought all this stuff thinking I'd be hosting family dinners and game nights. My phone was completely silent all day long. No calls, no texts, no happy Easter messages. Absolutely nothing, like I had never existed. The worst part was checking their Facebook posts later that evening. Madison had uploaded dozens of photos from Easter dinner with everyone laughing and having the time of their lives around my parents' dining room table. The same table where I used to sit as a kid. Blake posted videos of himself opening presents, including what looked like a brand new gaming setup that probably cost around $1,300. One of his comments said, "Best Easter ever." Mom shared some post about being thankful for family that actually shows up when it matters, complete with a bunch of crying, laughing emojis. They were celebrating my absence like it was the best Easter gift they could have possibly asked for. All that money I had sent them over the years, all those times I had worked back-to-back shifts in dangerous conditions just to help them out, and they were partying like my exile was cause for celebration. That's when it hit me like a brick to the face. They never actually wanted me around. They just wanted access to my bank account. I was never their son or brother. I was their ATM. On April 2nd, I was sitting in my empty house feeling completely sorry for myself and wondering what the hell I was going to do with my life now. I had never felt so alone and abandoned in my entire existence. Then my phone rang, and it was an unknown local number that I almost didn't answer. "Is this Tyler Chen?" the voice on the other end asked. "Yeah, who's asking?" I replied cautiously. "This is Linda Martinez from Martinez & Associates Law Firm. I'm calling about your grandfather, Henry Chen's estate. I'm very sorry for your loss," she said in a professional but sympathetic tone. My stomach dropped like I was falling off the platform. "What loss? What are you talking about?" I asked, completely confused. There was a long pause on her end before she continued. "Mr. Chen, your grandfather passed away on March 27th. You weren't notified?" I felt like the world had just collapsed around me. Grandpa Henry was dead. He had died on Easter Sunday, and nobody had bothered to tell me. The day after my family had banned me from Easter, my grandfather died alone, and nobody thought to call me and let me know. "No, ma'am, this is the first I'm hearing about it," I managed to say, my voice shaking. "I see. Well, I'm calling because you're named in his will, and we need to schedule a reading as soon as possible," she explained. I had to sit down because my legs just gave out underneath me. Grandpa Henry had left me something in his will. We weren't super close growing up. He was my dad's father, and since me and Dad didn't get along after I left home, I barely saw him, except for maybe 6 minutes at family gatherings before I stopped going to those too. "What did he leave me?" I asked, trying to process everything. "I can't discuss specifics over the phone, but it's significant. Can you come in tomorrow morning?" she said. I drove to her office the next day, still trying to wrap my head around everything that was happening. Grandpa Henry had owned this small machine shop that he had run for decades, plus an old farmhouse on about 22 acres outside town. I figured maybe he had left me some tools or his old pickup truck, maybe a few $1,000s. Nothing major. Miss Martinez spread out a bunch of papers on her desk like she was dealing cards. The machine shop, the farmhouse, the land, and apparently a bunch of rental properties around town that I didn't even know he owned. 14 houses total, all completely paid off, bringing in about $16,500 a month in rent. The total estimated value is approximately $2.6 million. I almost fell out of my chair and had to grab the armrest to keep from sliding onto the floor. $2.6 million. My grandfather was secretly a millionaire. The man who drove a 22-year-old truck and wore the same 4 flannel shirts was worth more than most people see in a lifetime. "Why me?" "We didn't talk much after I left home," I asked, still in complete shock. Miss Martinez handed me an envelope with my name written on it in Grandpa's careful handwriting. "He left this letter for you." Inside was a note that made my eyes water. "Tyler, you're the only one in this family who knows the value of hard work. Your father and his children think success should be handed to them, but you've earned everything you have through blood, sweat, and sacrifice. Don't let them destroy what you've built. They'll come back when they smell money, but remember how they treated you when they thought you had nothing to offer them. Make me proud, son. Henry." The old man knew everything. He had been watching from a distance all these years and knew exactly what kind of people they were. He had seen how they treated me and made his decision accordingly. But there was a catch. The will reading had to include the whole family. and if anyone tried to contest it, they would forfeit any claim to anything, not even $1. When's the reading? I asked. April 9th. I've already contacted your father, she replied. I bet that was an interesting fucking conversation. The week between when I found out about the inheritance and the will reading was honestly the most entertaining week of my entire life. My phone started going absolutely crazy about 3 hours after Miss Martinez called my dad to inform him about the will reading. The first call was from Blake, and suddenly his tone was completely different from how he had spoken to me in months. Tyler, bro, did you hear about Grandpa? He said, and I noticed how I was suddenly bro again. It was funny how fast that had changed. Yeah, I heard, I replied simply. This is insane, right? We're all going to be loaded, he said excitedly. We should totally party when you come back for the lawyer thing. I'm thinking Vegas. I noticed how he said, we're all going to be loaded. This kid who hadn't spoken to me in months was already planning how to spend money that wasn't his. We'll see, I said and hung up on him. Next was Madison, and her approach was completely different. Tyler, oh my God, I feel so bad about Easter. Dad was just really stressed about work stuff and took it out on everyone. You know how he gets when sales are down, she said, trying to sound sincere. It was interesting how Dad's work stress had somehow turned into me being banned from Easter, but I played along. Sure, Madison. So, do you know what Grandpa left us? Blake thinks it might be a lot of money, enough to change our lives, she said, getting straight to the point. I'll find out at the reading, I told her. Well, obviously we'll split everything equally between the 4 of us kids, right? That's only fair. I mean, we're all his grandchildren, she said, already making assumptions. I almost laughed out loud. Now she was worried about fairness. We'll see what the will says. Come on, Tyler. You're not seriously thinking about keeping everything for yourself, are you? That would be so selfish, she pressed. I'm not thinking about anything. I'm just going to listen to what Grandpa wanted, I replied. She got quiet for a second before continuing. Well, whatever happens, we should celebrate together as a family. Maybe take a trip somewhere nice. We could all use a vacation. The best call was from my dad, who actually tried to sound sincere and fatherly. Son, I owe you a big apology. I was dealing with some work drama and took it out on you unfairly. You know how it is in sales. End-of-year quotas, stressed customers, the whole thing, he said, trying to explain away his behavior. Anyway, why don't you come over tonight? Your mom's making that pot roast you used to like as a kid, he continued. This was the same mom who had told me to leave them alone just a week earlier. I'm busy, I said curtly. Tyler, come on, let's not let some family disagreement get in the way of this important time. We need to stick together through this loss, he pleaded. There it was. Not grief over Grandpa's death, not wanting to reconcile our relationship, but this important time when money might be involved. I'll see you at the will reading, I told him. Look, I know things have been tough between us, but your grandfather would want us to be united as a family right now, he said, playing the guilt card. Would he? Because he seemed pretty clear about what he thought of family unity when he wrote his will, I replied. Dad went quiet for a moment. What do you mean? Nothing. I'll see you Wednesday, I said and hung up. Over the next week, I got constant text messages from all of them. Madison sent me links to expensive apartments with messages like, thinking about moving here after we get our inheritance. Blake was looking at new cars online and sending me screenshots of Corvettes and BMWs. Mom started talking about remodeling their house and taking a cruise to Europe. Dad mentioned maybe opening his own dealership instead of working for someone else. They were already spending money they didn't have. Money from a man who had died thinking they were greedy parasites. It was absolutely incredible to watch. I spent that week doing some research on Grandpa's properties, and what I discovered was absolutely mind-blowing. It turns out he had been incredibly smart with his investments over the years. The rental houses were all located in good neighborhoods with reliable long-term tenants. Some of these people had been renting the same places for over 12 years, which showed just how well-maintained and desirable these properties were. The machine shop was still profitable, even though he had mostly retired and had a manager running the day-to-day operations. He had specialized in custom parts for local factories and had contracts worth hundreds of thousands of dollars annually. The man had built a legitimate business empire starting from absolutely nothing, just a single welding torch in his garage back in the 1970s. By the time he died, he owned property worth millions and had more money in the bank than my entire family had ever seen combined. I also found out more about why he had chosen me specifically. I talked to his neighbor, Mrs. Garcia, who told me that Grandpa had been following my family on social media for years. He saw Madison's constant shopping posts and party pictures Blake's expensive gaming purchases and complaints about being broke, and my parents always posting about money problems while simultaneously buying new stuff they couldn't afford. But he also saw my posts from the rigs. Photos of me working in dangerous conditions, covered in grease and mud, earning every dollar through sweat and blood. Your grandfather always said you were the only one who understood that nothing in life is free, Mrs. Garcia told me. He was so proud when you made something of yourself despite how your family treated you. He used to show me pictures of your work and tell me stories about the letters you'd send him. That hit me right in the chest. Letters? Oh yes, you two wrote back and forth all the time. He kept everyone in a box by his bed, she said. This man I had barely spoken to in person had been quietly rooting for me all these years, while my own parents treated me like a walking ATM. It was almost too much to process. April 9th couldn't come fast enough. I showed up at the law office at exactly 2 p.m. wearing clean jeans and my best work shirt. Nothing fancy, but I looked respectable and professional. My family was already there when I arrived. And holy shit, they had dressed up like they were going to a wedding or a job interview. Dad wore a suit I had never seen before. He probably bought it that week specifically for this occasion. Mom had a new dress and jewelry I didn't recognize. Madison looked like she was going to some fancy party, all done up with makeup and her hair professionally styled. Blake actually wore a button-down shirt instead of a graphic tee, which might have been the first time in his adult life. They were all sitting on one side of the conference table, whispering excitedly to each other, like kids on Christmas morning waiting to open presents. When I walked in, their faces lit up with these huge, fake smiles that made my skin crawl. "Tyler!" Mom jumped up and tried to hug me. "We've missed you so much!" This was the same woman who had told me to leave them alone just 11 days earlier. I sat down across from them without saying anything, watching their forced cheerfulness and wondering how they could be so shameless. Miss Martinez came in carrying a thick folder and looking very serious. "Before we begin, I want to make it clear that this will was updated 9 months ago and properly witnessed by 3 independent parties. Mr. Chen was of completely sound mind when these changes were made," she announced. Madison leaned forward eagerly. "What kind of changes?" Miss Martinez opened the folder and pulled out several documents. Henry Chen's will leaves his entire estate, valued at approximately $2.6 million, to his grandson Tyler Chen. The room went dead silent. You could hear the fluorescent lights humming overhead and the air conditioning kicking on. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then Blake absolutely exploded. "What the hell? That can't be right!" Miss Martinez stayed perfectly calm despite Blake's outburst. "The will is very explicit. The machine shop, the farmhouse, all rental properties, and associated assets transfer to Tyler." Dad's face turned bright red, and his hands started shaking with rage. "This is ridiculous! Tyler hasn't even talked to Henry in years!" "That's not accurate," I said quietly, enjoying watching their world crumble. Grandpa and I stayed in touch through email and letters. "Emails?" Madison screeched like I had just confessed to murder. "You were talking to him behind our backs?" "I wasn't hiding anything. You never bothered to ask," I replied calmly. "This is..." Blake stood up and started pacing around the small conference room like a caged animal. "We visited him way more than you did. We brought him groceries and helped with yard work." "You helped with yard work exactly twice in 11 years, I said, looking him directly in the eyes. "And both times you complained the entire time about getting dirty." Mom started tearing up, and her mascara was already starting to run down her cheeks. Henry always said he'd take care of all his grandchildren. We were counting on this. We have plans. We already talked to contractors about renovating the house. That's when it all clicked into place for me. They weren't just surprised by this news. They had been expecting this inheritance for months, maybe even years. They had been planning on it and probably spending money they didn't have because they thought Grandpa's death would solve all their financial problems. "How much debt are you guys in?" I asked, genuinely curious. They all went quiet and looked at each other nervously, like kids who had been caught doing something wrong. "Seriously, how much?" I pressed. Dad finally answered, trying to maintain some dignity. "That's not relevant to this discussion." "Blake, what do you owe on credit cards?" I asked directly. "Dude, why does that matter right now?" he said defensively. "Because you were already spending Grandpa's money before he was even buried," I said bluntly. That's not how it is," Blake stammered. "Madison, how much do you owe?" I continued. She crossed her arms defiantly. "I don't have to answer that." I turned to Miss Martinez. "Does the will mention anything about family debts?" She nodded and pulled out another document. Mr. Chen was aware of his family's financial difficulties. He specifically states, I am not responsible for the poor financial choices of my children and grandchildren. Tyler is under no obligation to use his inheritance to rescue family members who have repeatedly proven they cannot manage money responsibly. Holy shit. Grandpa really had been paying attention to everything. He knew exactly what kind of financial disasters they all were. Blake started panicking. This isn't fair! Tyler makes crazy money already! He doesn't need all this! And you do? I asked. We're family! We're supposed to help each other! He said desperately. I actually laughed out loud. Help each other? Like how you helped me at Easter? Madison tried switching tactics. Tyler, be reasonable. You can't seriously keep all of this. Grandpa would want us to share. He loved all of us. If Grandpa wanted you to have it, he would have left it to you, I said simply. Dad slammed his hand on the table, making everyone jump. You ungrateful piece of shit! After everything we've done for you? What exactly have you done for me? Name one thing, I challenged him. We raised you, he shouted. Until I was 18 and you kicked me out for not going to college, I reminded him. We supported your career choice, he said weakly. You called me worthless trailer trash and said I'd never amount to anything, I corrected. Mom was crying harder now, and her makeup was completely ruined. Tyler, please. We made mistakes, but we're still family. Family forgives each other. You're absolutely right, I said, and they looked hopeful for a second. Family does forgive, so I forgive you for Easter. I forgive you for not telling me Grandpa died. I forgive you for only calling me when you need money. I forgive you for treating me like an ATM for 8 years. Their faces lit up with hope, thinking I was about to cave. But forgiveness doesn't mean I'm stupid enough to give you money you'll just waste on more stupid shit, I finished. I signed all the papers, shook Miss Martinez's hand, and headed for the door. Behind me, I could hear Madison screaming and Blake hitting something in frustration. In the parking lot, Dad caught up to me and grabbed my arm aggressively. This isn't over, he said through gritted teeth. We'll fight this. We'll contest the will. Go ahead, I told him, pulling my arm free from his grip. Miss Martinez already explained what happens when you contest the will. You'll get absolutely nothing and pay thousands in legal fees you can't afford. His face went pale as the reality of the situation hit him. He knew I was right, and he knew they were completely screwed. Tyler, please, we're family, he said, his voice breaking with desperation. No, we're not, I said firmly. Family doesn't abandon each other right before Easter. Family doesn't hide deaths from each other. Family doesn't only call when they need money. I drove home to my house, made myself some coffee, and called my supervisor to let him know I'd be taking extended time off to handle business affairs. The business of watching my family realize they had completely screwed themselves over. The next 2 months were absolutely incredible. It was like watching a slow-motion car crash that you can't look away from, except instead of being horrified, I was entertained as hell by the whole spectacle. It started with Blake showing up at my door on April 13th, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. His hair was greasy, his clothes were wrinkled, and he had dark circles under his eyes. Tyler, man, I'm completely screwed, he said without any greeting. I owe like $31,000 on credit cards, and my car payment is due. Can you help me out just until I get back on my feet? I was curious about their expectations. How much were you expecting from Grandpa's will? I don't know, maybe $450,000? Enough to pay everything off and get a decent car. Maybe move out of Mom and Dad's house, he said hopefully. You were going to blow $450,000 on credit card debt and a car? I asked incredulously. And other stuff, but come on, you're rich now. What's $31,000 to you? It's like pocket change, he pleaded. I closed the door without another word. Madison lasted until April 18th before showing up at my doorstep. She was crying, which was unusual for her since she's usually more of a screamer than a crier. Tyler, I'm pregnant, she announced dramatically. Congratulations, I said flatly. The guy took off when he found out. I can't raise a baby alone. I need help, she said, expecting immediate sympathy. Get a job, I suggested. I can't work while I'm pregnant. I have terrible morning sickness, she protested. Millions of pregnant women work every day, Madison, I pointed out. Those women don't have brothers who could easily help them, she said, trying to guilt me. Those women also don't have brothers who got told Easter was better without them, I reminded her. She tried the guilt trip approach. This is your nephew or niece we're talking about. Don't you want them to have a good life? I want them to have a mother who makes responsible choices, I replied. You're really going to punish an innocent baby because of some stupid family fight? She asked desperately. I'm not punishing anyone, I'm just not rewarding bad decisions, I said. She left screaming about how I was heartless and cruel and how she hoped I choked on my money. Mom and Dad took a coordinated approach. They started showing up together, trying to manipulate me with guilt and sob stories. Your grandfather wouldn't want his family to suffer like this, Mom said during one of their visits. Grandpa specifically wrote that you guys make poor financial decisions, I reminded her. We've learned from our mistakes, she insisted. What mistakes? Name one specific mistake you've learned from, I challenged. Well, we shouldn't have been so hard on you about college, she said weakly. That's not a financial mistake. That's just admitting you were wrong about my career choice, I pointed out. They couldn't do it. They literally couldn't identify a single financial mistake they had made because they didn't think spending money they didn't have was a mistake. They thought it was normal behavior. Dad tried a different approach and attempted intimidation tactics. You're tearing this family apart over money, he said accusingly during one of their visits. I'm not tearing anything apart. I'm just not fixing what you already broke, I replied calmly. We're your parents. You owe us respect, he said, raising his voice. Respect is earned. What have you done to earn mine? I asked him directly. He stormed off without an answer because he knew he didn't have one. The best part was watching their social media meltdown unfold in real time. Madison had to move back in with my parents because she couldn't afford rent on her own. Blake's car got repossessed, and he had to take the bus to his part-time job at the comic book store. Mom and Dad listed their house for sale because they were 4 months behind on mortgage payments. Everything they had been hiding with the promise of inheritance money was finally coming out into the open. All their financial disasters that they had been ignoring were suddenly catching up to them at once. The breaking point came in June, when all 4 of them showed up at my door together, looking desperate and completely defeated. Blake was twitchy and nervous, probably going through gaming withdrawal since his entire setup had been repossessed. Madison looked like she had been crying for days straight. Mom couldn't make eye contact with me. Dad was trying to maintain some dignity but failing miserably. Tyler, we really need to talk, Dad said, swallowing his pride. I let them in, mostly because I was curious to see how low they would actually go. They sat on my couch looking absolutely miserable. We've been thinking, Mom started carefully, like she was walking on eggshells. Maybe we could work out some kind of deal. What kind of deal? I asked, genuinely curious. We could work for you, Madison said desperately. You could hire us to help with the rental properties or the machine shop. I nearly choked on my coffee. You want me to hire you? It would keep the business in the family, Dad said, trying to sound reasonable. Make Henry proud. What qualifications do any of you have for property management or running a machine shop? I asked. Complete silence filled the room. Blake, have you ever fixed anything mechanical in your life? I continued. No, but I'm good with computers. I could learn, he said weakly. Madison, have you ever managed anything besides to get yourself fired? I pressed. I worked at a restaurant for like 5 months, she said defensively. You got fired for not showing up and stealing from the tip jar, I reminded her. That was different. I was going through stuff, she protested. Mom, what would you do? I asked. I could handle paperwork, answer phones, do bookkeeping, she suggested. You've never had a job in your adult life, I pointed out. I raised 3 children, she said, as if that qualified her for business management. One of whom you threw out at 18, and 2 others who are complete financial disasters, I said bluntly. Dad tried to take control of the conversation. The point is, we're willing to work now. We understand that money has to be earned. What do you understand? I asked, testing him. That we can't just expect handouts, he said, like he was guessing at the right answer on a test. Here's the thing, I said, standing up. Even if I believed you'd learned anything, which I don't, I wouldn't trust any of you with my business. You've proven you can't handle money, can't keep jobs, and can't treat family with basic decency. Blake started actually crying real tears. Tyler, please, I'm going to be homeless. You're living with Mom and Dad, I pointed out. They're losing their house, he said desperately. We're all going to be on the street, Madison added dramatically. Then maybe you should have thought about that before telling me Easter was better without me, I said coldly. Madison got angry. You're really going to let your pregnant sister become homeless over hurt feelings? I'm not making you homeless. Your choices are making you homeless, I corrected. This is all because we hurt your feelings one time? She asked incredulously. No, this is because you showed me exactly who you really are, and I believed you, I said. Mom tried one final guilt trip. Your grandfather would be ashamed of how you're treating family. Grandpa left me everything specifically because he knew you'd waste it. He's probably laughing wherever he is, watching you beg for money from the son you threw away. said. Dad completely lost it. Fine, keep your freaking money, but don't come crying to us when you need family. When have you ever been there when I needed you? Name one time, I challenged him. He had no answer. None of them did. They left, and that was the last time I saw any of them. It's been 10 months now since that final confrontation, and my life has been completely transformed. But the absolute best part has been watching my family's total collapse from the sidelines like some kind of twisted reality show that I can't stop watching. Dad had to declare bankruptcy in July. It turns out he owed money absolutely everywhere. Credit cards, personal loans, and he had even borrowed against his pension and taken out a second mortgage on the house. The house went into foreclosure in August, and they had to do one of those humiliating yard sales where neighbors come to pick through your entire life for bargain prices. They're renting a tiny 2-bedroom apartment now in the worst part of town. The kind of place where car break-ins happen weekly, and the walls are so thin you can hear every argument from the neighbors. Dad is now working at 2 different dealerships, trying to dig himself out of his financial hole. He's pulling 65-hour weeks and looking about 12 years older than he did last Easter. Blake moved to another state to live with some online friend he met through gaming. Last I heard through the grapevine, he was working night shifts in a warehouse, still complaining about how unfair life is. He sends me friend requests on social media every few weeks, which I promptly ignore every single time. Madison had her baby, a boy she named after some pop star I'd never heard of. The father never came back, so she's now a single mom on government assistance, living in a studio apartment that's barely big enough for one person, let alone a woman and a baby. She posted some passive-aggressive stuff on Facebook about fake family and how she's better off without people who change when they get money. Her friends kept asking what happened in the comments, and she just said, "Some people forget where they came from." Yeah, some people do forget where they came from. I remember exactly where I came from, and I remember exactly how I was treated there. The funniest part is that they've been telling people around town that I stole their inheritance and that Grandpa was either tricked by lawyers or wasn't in his right mind when he made the will. Nobody believes them because everyone in town knew that Grandpa Henry was sharp as a tack until the day he died. Plus, people remember how they treated me when I was younger. Mrs. Garcia told me that Mom tried to get neighbors to sign some kind of petition demanding an investigation into Grandpa's will. Mrs. Garcia told her to get lost, which apparently made Mom cry in public. Word spread around town about that incident pretty quickly, and it just made them look even more desperate and pathetic. Meanwhile, my own life has taken a complete turn for the better. I'm dating this amazing woman named Rebecca, who's a nurse practitioner at the local hospital. She's smart, independent, makes her own money, and doesn't expect me to solve her problems or pay her bills. When I told her about my family situation, she just said, "Good for you for standing up for yourself." And she actually meant it. We're talking about moving in together and maybe getting married eventually. She's the first person I've ever been with who loves me for who I am, not what I can give them. It's a completely different kind of relationship than anything I've ever experienced before. She supports herself, has her own goals and ambitions, and treats me like an equal partner rather than a walking ATM. The rental properties are doing great, bringing in steady income every month. The machine shop is thriving under the management team that Grandpa had put in place. I've been learning about property management and business operations, and it turns out I actually have a talent for it. Who would have thought that all those years of problem solving on oil rigs would translate so well to managing real estate and business operations? I've also been able to take some time to really think about what I want to do with my life. For the first time ever, I'm not living paycheck to paycheck or working in life-threatening conditions just to make ends meet. I have options now, and that feeling of freedom is something I never thought I'd experience. The best part is the peace and quiet. No more desperate phone calls in the middle of the night begging for emergency loans. No more guilt trips about family obligations. No more walking on eggshells wondering when the next financial crisis would hit and how much it would cost me to fix it. They made their choices when they thought I was just some blue-collar worker with nothing valuable to offer except my bank account. They chose money over family relationships. Then they got upset when I chose the exact same thing. Grandpa Henry saw this whole situation coming from miles away. He knew they were selfish, entitled, and would dump me the second I stopped being useful to them financially. He designed his will not just to take care of me, but to teach them a lesson about consequences that they desperately needed to learn. They wanted Easter to be better without me. Well, now their whole lives get to be without me, and they're finding out exactly what that really means. Looking back on everything that's happened, I can see that Grandpa Henry was watching and evaluating all of us for years. He saw how they treated me when I chose a different path, how they only reached out when they needed money, and how they celebrated my absence from family gatherings. He also saw how hard I worked, how I earned every dollar through dangerous and difficult labor, and how I kept sending them money despite their treatment of me. The letter he left me wasn't just an explanation. It was a warning, and a piece of advice rolled into one. He knew they would come back when they smelled money, and he wanted me to remember how they had treated me when they thought I had nothing to offer them. That wisdom has served me well over these past 10 months. I've learned that real family isn't about blood relations or guilt trips or financial obligations. Real family is about people who care about you for who you are, not what you can do for them. Rebecca has shown me more genuine love and support in the past few months than my biological family ever did in 30 years. The irony isn't lost on me that they spent years calling me selfish for not going to college, for leaving home, for working dangerous jobs far away from them. But when it came down to it, they were the selfish ones. They were willing to throw away any relationship with me over money they never earned and never deserved. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if they had just welcomed me home for Easter, like a normal family would. If they had been happy to see me, excited about the house I bought, supportive of my success instead of resentful of it, maybe things would have been different. Maybe Grandpa would have left them something too. But deep down, I know that's not who they really are. The way people treat you when they think you have nothing to offer them, that's who they really are. Everything else is just performance. I'm not angry anymore. I'm actually grateful. They showed me their true colors before I wasted any more years trying to build a relationship with people who saw me as nothing more than a source of money. They saved me from decades of being used and manipulated. Grandpa Henry gave me more than just money and property. He gave me the truth about my family and the freedom to build a real life with people who actually value me. He gave me the chance to break the cycle of dysfunction and entitlement that had defined our family for generations. Every month when I collect the rent from those 14 houses, every time I see the machine shop's profit reports, every time I look around my beautiful home that I share with someone who truly loves me, I think about that letter from Grandpa. Make me proud, son. I think I'm doing exactly that. TLDR. My family banned me from Easter because I bought a house without telling them. A week later, I found out my grandfather died and left me his entire $2.6 million estate while giving them nothing. Now they're all financially ruined and begging me for help. But I remember exactly how they treated me when they thought I was just a blue-collar worker with nothing to offer. Some lessons are expensive, and this one cost them everything.